Welcome, everyone. This is session NGW12, Artificial Intelligence. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and thank you especially for bearing with us as we scheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled the session. We had some outside constraints due to some other speakers that made us have to change the time more than once. I appreciate your taking the time to actually track down this session and to be here. My name is Jeff Barr. I work for Amazon Web Services, and I'm going to be talking to you about the Amazon Mechanical Turk and how it's used to create a new breed of web application. This is the agenda I'll be following today. I'm going to start out with an overview of the Amazon Web Services. I'll talk about the concept of artificial intelligence. I'll give you a couple of demos. I'll talk quite a bit about the process of writing Mechanical Turk applications. And as time permits, we'll have some Q&A. If we don't cover everything that we'd like in the Q&A time, I do have pretty much unlimited time this afternoon or this evening. I'd like to give you a bit of background so you know who I am. I've been a professional software developer since I was about 18 or 19, so far more than half of my life at this point I've been building code for pay. I spent time at a couple different startups working at positions like CTO or VP of engineering. Spent a few years at Microsoft on the Visual Studio team. I worked on technologies such as DHTML, XML, and web services. At the time I was there, pretty much wrapping up around mid-2000, we talked a lot about web services, but we talked a lot about them in the future sense. There were a few interesting ways you could demo web services. There were simple stock quote or weather services. Nothing really all that definitive, nothing that you could look at and say, this is something I could build a business around, or this is part of a business, or there's a real reason for this to exist other than it being a demo. I left Microsoft, worked with a number of different startups, and we still talked about web services in that kind of cloudy, indefinite, intermediate future, indeterminate future stage where we kind of had this sense that it was going to be important, but there really wasn't anything we could really point to and say, this is a legitimate web service. This is something you can actually build something with. You can build a real live application around this. So I remember being in offices of any number of different VCs after I left Microsoft and was consulting. We'd always draw these neat diagrams, and I'd be with these various tool companies. So we'd draw these nice diagrams. We'd have the internet. We would have our applications, our tools. And then there'd be this big kind of fuzzy cloud thing that would be commercial web services. And then when they'd finally press us and say, what about these commercial web services? We would always say, well, we strongly believe that those will exist in the future. And at that point, they would look at you and say, okay, well, you guys are clearly either ahead of your time or smoking crack or both, and didn't end up often funding these startups I was working with. So mid-2002, I became aware of the first beta of AWS, the Amazon Web Services. I saw that in a preview edition. And suddenly, all those cloudy pictures I'd been drawing for so long, there was actually a way to replace that cloud with a real nice solid box with Amazon.com inside, a fully defined, legitimate, business-focused set of web services. I saw that and kind of figured out this is where I want to, this is the next step for me in my career. Decided to join Amazon and signed up as a developer with the idea that I would put a little bit of my time into this brand new web services concept. That little bit of my time, which I think we budgeted at 5%, quickly grew until it was about 100% of my time. And then early in 2003, I was asked to become the first web services evangelist at Amazon. So I've been at the company over 3.5 years now. And in my role as web services evangelist, I travel all over the world. I meet with developers at user groups and conferences and private meetings. And I talk to developers about what it is that we're up to at Amazon, what we're building in terms of web services. Talks like this, day in and day out. In the last 2 weeks, I've been to Seoul, Korea and back. I've been to Silicon Valley and back. And here I am in Las Vegas. It's a lot of fun opening developers' minds to these great web services that we have. And I hope you enjoy what it is I have to share with you today. So, has anybody not heard of Amazon.com? All right. Anybody not made a purchase at Amazon.com? Cool. How many of you have heard of the Amazon Web Services? Whoa, okay. So I guess I'm doing my job after all. That's good. So if you didn't know, we're most widely known as an online retailer. We have over 55 million active customer accounts representing people who have logged into our site and made a purchase in the last 12 months. We have website presences in 7 different countries: the US, UK, Germany, Japan, France, Canada, and China. We're not so well known, however, as either a technology consumer or as a technology provider. You can imagine behind the scenes at all these websites, there's a vast amount of technology. We have a huge data warehouse with business data in there, historical pricing, click tracking, many, many different kinds of data. Last I checked, we had 25 terabytes of data in that data warehouse. We operate a world-class logistics facility. We have 21 different fulfillment centers where we ship products to customers, 9 million square feet altogether. And then finally, we're also a technology provider. We've got hundreds of thousands of Amazon associates using our technology to represent our products on their site and then to earn commissions based on sales that they send us. We have over 1 million Amazon marketplace sellers that use technology to list and sell their products on our site. And then finally, over 150,000 software developers have signed up for our Amazon Web Services developer program. So that number right there represents all the traveling and all the evangelism I've been doing for the last 4 years now, that 150,000. That's one of the main ways that we can measure the success of the evangelism effort. Let's talk a little bit about web services. So when I mention web services, how familiar is that to you? If you've heard of them or used them before, could you give me a quick show of hands? Excellent. Wow, great audience. So let's just kind of go through this diagram quickly then. At the bottom, classical system, we've got our operating system. We've got libraries or DLLs or assemblies on top of that to represent various facilities of the operating system. And then we have an application. So this is the pre-web services model of building an application. When you chose to build that application, you chose an operating system, and you got a set of facilities. If you were building on Windows, but you saw some really cool facility on the Mac, you really couldn't take advantage of it. You basically had to make your platform choice, and you were committed to that for the lifetime of your application. Web services extends that model. At the base, we've got the internet. We've got all different types of web services from Amazon and from a number of other organizations. And then that application actually spans the services from the local operating system, and then web services available all over the web. One of the points I like to make here is when you start choosing web services, you don't say, well, I'm going to be solely a consumer of Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Web Services or Yahoo Web Services or eBay Web Services. You can very, very easily build an application that combines and even mashes up, as they say, data from multiple different web services. So you don't have to make that exclusive platform choice. You have a lot of ability to add in additional services as they become available and as the industry evolves. So let's talk about the Amazon Web Services. This is a set of APIs that give developers programmatic access to our data and our technology. So much as our retail site is our consumer interface, and consumers go to our retail site to get at what's inside, developers go to our APIs to get at what's inside of our firewall. Things like building block web services, our web scale infrastructure, the ability to do e-commerce, content, data and information, product listings, product reviews, wish lists. We enable the creation of new business models. Some of those I'll show you today. And then even customer-created content. If customers type in reviews to our site, we make that available through APIs. If they rate products, if they create their own wish lists, all of that is available through APIs. We expose all these with the expectation developers will take these APIs, take all this rich data, and then build applications and put them out for everyone to use. We very, very explicitly encourage commercial use of all these APIs. We're not in this just as some kind of experiment. This is something very, very important, very serious to us. We see this as a pretty fundamental shift in the way developers build applications. Instead of building things solely dependent on your local machine, you build applications that can pull in data from one or more web services. This is our product family. I promised you there's a minimum of PowerPoint animation in this slide. You'll see a few things flying around, but I'm not good enough with PowerPoint to do a whole lot of animation. This is our product family, and the great thing about this slide is we've been rolling out services at such a pace that every couple of weeks or even every month I need to end up revising this slide. We currently have 8 different services, either in production or in beta. We have the e-commerce service, which is complete access to our product catalog. We give that service away for free, and we pay developers commissions through the Amazon Associates program so that they ultimately end up getting paid to use that service. The Amazon historical pricing lets Amazon marketplace sellers reach back in time to older pricing for particular products. So if they have a product and they want to judge, is its price generally increasing or decreasing? Is the product more toward the end of its life and sales are declining, or is it still have life ahead of it and sales are going up? The Amazon historical pricing service lets developers do that. We open that service up to developers for a monthly fee. The Mechanical Turk is the subject of my talk today. Implements artificial intelligence, and I'll get to what that means really, really soon. We charge the users of that service a 10% commission for the work that they load in, and that lets you create a paid internet scale workforce. The Amazon Simple Queue service is an IT building block. You can create a scalable hosted queue on Amazon servers, and then you can use that queue to build any kind of distributed application or distributed processing model. Currently in late stages of beta. Amazon S3 is a brand new service. We just rolled it out a week ago. The concept of S3 is storage for the internet. S3 is an acronym for Simple Storage Service. The idea is we give developers a very clean, very straightforward API that lets you put and get objects into your Amazon account. The objects can be up to 5 gigabytes in length, and we charge you in a very simple model. We charge you for the data transfer back and forth, and we charge you for the actual storage. Finally, we have a subsidiary company called Alexa.com. They're not especially well known, but they do some pretty cool stuff, and we've exposed 3 different services from Alexa. The Alexa Web Information Service provides programmatic access to 300 terabytes of web crawl data that they've collected. We allow developers to make 10,000 calls per month for free to that service, and then we charge you 15 cents per 1,000 calls after that. We have the Alexa Web Search platform, and I'll actually be talking about that in considerable detail at a session tomorrow morning. The concept behind AWSP, as we call it, is developers can build their own search engine. You can write your own code that runs on the Alexa platform and has access to hundreds of terabytes of crawl data. You can automatically parallelize it to run across multiple compute nodes, and you can very easily and very cost-effectively build that search engine from scratch. You pay us simply for your time and for the storage and for the bandwidth used. The last service is called Alexa Top Sites. The idea here is that Alexa has this Alexa toolbar running on millions of desktops all over the world. That toolbar securely and privately sends visiting data back to the Alexa site. It's collected and aggregated, and we're able to do a very, very accurate judgment of what are the most popular sites on the web. Once we have that data, it's available through the Alexa Web Information Service and also through this Top Site service. So you can make a simple API call. You can say, give me the 50 most popular sites on the web, or give me the 50 most popular sites in the United States or Korea or wherever you'd like to be. So this is our product family. Since S3 is brand new, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about that before we move on to Mechanical Turk. S3 means Simple Storage Service, storage for the internet. A real simple, real clean web service. You can write data up to us and then read it back down. We charge you at the most economical possible prices we could come up with. We charge you 15 cents per gigabyte month to store data. So if you upload a gigabyte of data to S3, you keep it in your account for a month. We will actually bill your Amazon account for 15 cents. And then we charge you 20 cents a gigabyte to either push data up into S3 or to bring it back down. You have full access control over all that data. So you can choose to expose your data publicly if you're willing to bear the cost of anybody possibly downloading it, or you can keep it private, or you can actually have a controlled access model. Each piece of data that you put in has full control of the readers and the writers. Scalable, reliable, cost-effective, and as simple as possible. All right, let's move on to the Amazon Mechanical Turk. Way back in the late 1700s, an inventor created what appeared to the outside world to be a chess-playing machine. You'd walk up to this machine, and they'd very carefully open up all the doors in advance of the chess match. They'd show you all these levers and gears and cogs inside. And they'd close it up, and they'd select an opponent. It would play a really good game of chess. So this Turk, as it's called, was actually a little hand, and he would very carefully move the chess pieces from place to place. Played a great game of chess, and people at the time could not figure out what was going on. A lot of people did analysis and realized that it didn't make a whole lot of sense for there to be truly something mechanical in there. There was a lot of suspicion that, there's probably a person involved somehow, but they never could quite figure out exactly what was going on. Turns out, after a long, long time, of course, there really was a person hidden inside. So the concept is really important here. Looks like a machine on the inside, but the best way to actually, on the outside it's the machine. On the inside, the best way to actually accomplish this processing task, which in this case, playing a game of chess, is to actually use a person. So the Amazon Mechanical Turk actually puts an API around this concept. The idea that within your application, you can make web service calls to load specific pieces of work into the Mechanical Turk, along with your identity and your payment information. And you can then tap into an internet-scale workforce that's able to actually do these pieces of work for you. So the rest of my talk, I'll be talking about what this is all about, how you do it. I'll be showing some examples of some cool things developers have built. So if you've ever done image processing, you could imagine the difficulty of building some kind of algorithm that might look at this kind of ugly red chair and decide, is this really a chair or is this a table? You could put all kinds of algorithms to look for horizontal planes and vertical planes and legs and so forth. You could probably spend several years trying to put a piece of artificial intelligence together that would give you reliable results for, is this a chair or is this a table? With Mechanical Turk, we can do something a lot simpler. Your program gets to a certain decision point, and it says, I've got this image here. I don't quite know if it's a chair, and I need to put it in the collection of chairs, or if it's a table, and I need to put it in my collection of tables. I'll simply make an API call to Mechanical Turk. I'll ask a couple people. I'll look for a consensus in their responses. Once I get it, I'll actually use that response and proceed. So replacing expensive research and development with relatively inexpensive human power. So I actually did this as an experiment yesterday. I used a site called Hit Builder, and I built what's called a HIT, or a human intelligence task. I built that. I uploaded this little task called chair or table, and I asked 15 people if this was a chair or a table. And the survey says, this is the question I posed, is this a chair? And a little selector at the bottom, yes or no. And sure enough, I got the result. 100% of the people said, yes, this is a chair. So a very, very simple way that we could use the Mechanical Turk to make a decision. I'm going to be showing you that Hit Builder site in great detail a little bit later on. It itself is an ASP.NET application, is a wonderful way to get started with the Mechanical Turk. So this is what the Mechanical Turk is all about. A web service API to let computers incorporate artificial intelligence, or human power, directly into their processing by making requests from humans. So if you've built a desktop application, that application might be processing some big chunk of data, process, gets to some certain point, can't decide what it's got to do next. Is it the chair or is it the table? If it's a desktop app, you could conceive of popping up the dialog and simply asking the user sitting there at the desktop to move forward. If you have millions of chairs and millions of tables, maybe not so easy to do. If it's a web application, maybe there is no user sitting there at the desktop. The easiest thing to do would be simply push it out to the Mechanical Turk and let the audience decide for you. The idea would be, let's put the human in the loop. So this is a really simple piece of pseudocode. We've got this is not in any particular language. We're reading photos. Let's say we're reading some photos. Maybe we have a site and we've asked people to submit a picture of themselves. And our filtering task here would be, let's make sure that there's actually a picture or a human in the picture. So we get pictures. We call the Mechanical Turk with the hit data, and we ask people, is this a person or not? We get the answer back. So this is actually modeled for the purposes of the pseudocode as a synchronous operation, whereas in real life, it's asynchronous. You put in a big flurry of requests, and then you poll the system to get the answers back from there. So if we get a positive answer back, if the picture contains a human, we then accept the picture. Otherwise, we reject the picture. So this is really the prototypical loop that you would use when you're implementing what's called a requester application for Mechanical Turk. So at the point when we did call Mechanical Turk, the piece of work, or the hit, is loaded to the mechanicalturk.site, which is called mturk.com. Potential workers can browse to that site. They see interesting pieces of work. If you wanted to, you could put a pretest called a qualification in front of that work to ensure that the person has really got the particular skills needed. You could give them some sample pictures, let them give you the responses. You might say, I'm going to give them 4 pictures that are either humans or not humans, and only if they gave me a perfect set of responses will I use them on my workforce. In other cases, you might say, I need to test my workforce to do a particular language. Maybe you have a task that says, read some English, translate it into French. So you could put a qualification test along with your hits that says, I need to make sure that users can actually read English and translate it into French. You do that, you have the ability to either do objective or subjective grading of the results. And once you have that, only those specially qualified workers are allowed access to the work that you put in. Here's a little flow diagram. So let's say you are the organization that has work to be done. You are the requester. You'll be using our APIs to put work into the system. That work is composed of hits or human intelligence tasks. So that little question I posed, is this a chair or a table, that was an individual hit or a piece of work. That particular one, I didn't associate any qualifications. I figured pretty much anybody who could find their computer and their mouse could probably figure out if that was a chair or a table. I didn't attach any qualifications. Once those hits are in the system, another piece of information that you load is you load in a reference to your Amazon account, and you load in a dollar amount that says, this is how much you will pay for each piece of work to be done. So quite a number of the pieces of work in the system, they start out very, very simple. People will pay 1 or 2 cents to get a quick opinion or a quick fact from the workforce. There are other tasks in the system that are already trending up to between $5 and $7 a piece for things like translating a podcast or listening to a podcast and generating a transcript of that. The hits, as soon as they're loaded, become available on mturk.com in real time. Workers of all different types are scanning mturk.com, looking for pieces of work that they both are qualified for and that they feel like doing, and that they look at the reward and say, is this worth doing or not? Interesting aside, it's actually pretty amazing how much work people will do sometimes for 1 or 2 cents. We'll see that in a little bit. I'll do a real-time example. So the workers do the pieces of work. They then return those completed hits back to the system, where your application can retrieve those results. You do have complete control of who's allowed to do the work because you can set qualifications. You can also put other rules on the results. If you wanted to, you could take each piece of work and you could send it to any number of workers. Like maybe you have something that's a little bit subjective. You might want to send out every piece of that subjective work to 5 different people. As soon as 3 out of the 5 have given you the same answer, you could accept that as the correct answer. So you can implement what's called plurality or a voting mechanism. So what does this mean? For software developers, you get the ability to build applications that you couldn't have done in the past without that little component of human intelligence. You might have an algorithm that does a really good job 90% of the time, and you realize it would be a huge amount of work to do that last very, very difficult 10%. You could either expend that huge amount of money, or you can farm out those tasks to the Mechanical Turk and get those things done very, very easily. For businesses, you have the ability to very efficiently load in tasks. There might be hundreds of thousands, even millions of tasks that need human intelligence. And then for the worker community, you can make money very easily with skills that you already have. You can do it incrementally if you're sitting there in front of the TV with your laptop every time a commercial comes on. And people do this. They'll sit there and the commercial comes on. They'll do a couple of hits, and they proceed. I've actually had students tell me they can do hits while they're sitting there in school. As a parent of college-age kids, that's kind of scary, thinking that you're paying for college so they can sit there clicking away on these hits, but it is the way it goes. And a lot of businesses that in the past you would have thought, where am I going to get this workforce of 5,000 or 10,000 or a million people? You've suddenly got this API to make that happen essentially automatically. A couple of different things we've used this for in the past. We've done a lot of image cleanup. We have a subsidiary company of Amazon, A9.com. A9 has millions and millions of pictures that are what they call block view images. They drove a bunch of trucks up and down a bunch of city streets. At every address, they took picture after picture after picture. At any given picture, there's no way for them to know, is this the best picture of the Starbucks or the McDonald's or whatever we want to find at that address. So the first use we had for Mechanical Turk, we loaded millions upon millions of pictures into the system, and we loaded each picture along with the business we thought was in the picture. We gave the purpose of the hit was to look at 5 different pictures and say, which of these 5 different pictures, or none of the above, has the appropriate business in there. This was actually the way we rolled out Mechanical Turk, and it was fascinating to watch as people realized they could actually make pretty serious money with this. We had people writing browser extensions and getting big screen monitors and putting Xbox controllers on their PC so they could sit there and click on these images as quickly as possible. At the point when we had all these images loaded and ready to go, we had people that were earning $30 or $40 per hour doing this image processing. Another type application, this one's called Hit Builder, and this is actually more of a user type application. The idea being that as we provide the mechanical Turk right now, it's solely accessible through APIs. So the entrepreneurs at Hit Builder said, let's build an application to simplify the process of creating the hits and managing the results. This is an interface for requesters, makes it very easy to create and issue the hits, and you don't have to deal with any code. You don't have to deal with any XML. You don't make any API calls whatsoever. And right now it's free, but you do need an Amazon requester account. So let me switch over here to my demo machine. And voila. Wait for the demo machine. Any minute now we'll have our demo machine. Let's see what's going on here. Aha, demo machine, okay. All right, so let's go to hitbuilder.com. So the idea here is that with this tabbed ASP.NET powered interface, we can very easily build a hit. We can make a request of the audience. I'm going to start here. I've already created an account on Amazon. I've created an account on Hit Builder. And I've done one really important thing. I've funded my Amazon account. I put $50 in there a month or two ago. And as I do different pieces of work, as I put hits into the system, that account is drawn down slowly as the different hits are actually processed. OK, so let's go ahead and build a hit group. I'm going to start from scratch here. And I'm going to call this What is Mix? We need to know what is. Didn't realize I couldn't type before, except I've had an ergonomic keyboard. Okay, what is MIX06? We'll put in a quick description here. Put in a quick description, save this. And then I'm actually going to build the hit itself, the request that we put out before the users. All right, we'll call this What is Mix? So now I'm building the template, or the question that we're going to ask. And what we'll call this, What is Mix? MIX06. Okay, what is MIX06? And then what we'll do, we'll put a little radio group here, and we'll prompt the user. I'll put in some values. Let's see, the first one is MIX06 a floor wax? And so I'm designing a radio group here. Given that people are getting a cent or two to answer these questions, you have to be very, very good at designing them, or you're going to not get high-quality answers. It could be a web conference. So I'm putting in both the value that will be displayed and the value that will be returned in the hit. And finally, it's how about a kitchen appliance? And we'll get a value of appliance coming back from that. OK, that should do it. We'll have 3 different values there. So I've designed my hit. I can do a preview. So this is when workers actually see this question or this hit on their screen, they're just going to see this simple question in front of them. Looks pretty straightforward. I should actually add one more. Why don't we just put a none of the above? Just in case they don't think it's any of these. We'll add that, and we'll save. OK, so there's our hit we're going to ask. And now I'm going to actually put this out on the web for people to answer it. So maybe we want 10 different people to answer this question for us. And I'm going to give them, let's say, 2 cents a piece to do it. 2 cents. I've got control of how long the hit will remain in the system. If I wanted to, I could put a qualification on there so that I could limit this hit to only users that have been able to answer a particular question for me. This is pretty simple, so I suspect we'll just put it in as is. We'll just go ahead and post the hits. So at this point, 10 requests for work are being loaded into the Mechanical Turk site, mturk.com. So Hit Builder is actually making web service requests to load that hit into the system. So it's been posted. Now this is a very important page on mturk.com. This is the page which lists all the kinds of work that are currently available. I'll go ahead and refresh that. And we've actually got 11 different kinds of work in here right now. So here's the one that I've got. Where is it? Oh, I must be on the second page. Okay, what is MIX? So here's the piece of work I've put in. So anybody anywhere around the world has the opportunity to answer this question. If I wanted to, I could look at this hit, and I have the opportunity to either accept it or not. Once I accept it, I'll decide to do the work. And I actually happen to know that it is a web conference, so I'll answer it. So I've now answered it. Now, for some kinds of hits, there's the opportunity to do hit after hit after hit of the same type, but with different instance data inside. And this particular hit, it's just a one-shot deal. Once I've done it, I can't stuff the ballot box by doing it over and over and over again. I'll go back to Hit Builder, and the next thing I can do is I can manage the hit results. So I've done a piece of work. Let's go ahead and take, where is it? And where am I? There we go. What is MIX? You can see I've done a lot of different hits lately. And I'll pick that. We've already got 6 answers to this question. And using this application, I can look at the different answers. We've got all these different things here. If I wanted to, I could pull this up on a graph. And there we go. Most folks seem to actually know that it was a conference, which is great. So you can imagine in your application, you need to know some fact, you need to make some decision, you need to get either objective or subjective input from some actual real live breathing human beings. Mechanical Turk lets you do that very, very easily. We can refresh this, and it costs me, what, a grand total of 12 or 15 cents. Okay, somebody thought it was an appliance. Thanks a lot. So the other thing I didn't mention is that you as the requester have the ability to grade the returned answers, and you can put feedback onto each worker account, and each worker is measured both globally across all the different kinds of work that they do, and then locally across each particular kind of work. So using the concepts existing in the Amazon reputation system, you as the requester have the ability to signal back to us how well the workers are doing at different kinds of tasks. If you want, you can even look at workers, and within your worker community, you see workers that are doing a great job at something. You can promote them to essentially a higher level so that when the next generation of work comes along, you can say, I only want folks that have done a good job at my first kind of work to do the harder style of work. So there's always this question, like, what if people just give you random answers? Well, if they give random answers, then the people putting the work in there are going to detect that. We could ask the same question, and the folks that said this is an appliance or none, we could choose to actually not accept that work. I can go back to here. Okay, so if I reject your work, then you will not get paid. Now we also rate the workers get the opportunity to rate the requesters as well. So if requesters reject too high of a percentage of the work that's in the system, then requesters will get a bad reputation as well. So let's find this question once again. So at this point, I've already got 9 different answers. I could choose to accept all of the answers that I got, or I could individually accept different answers here. Did you give us a correct answer or an incorrect answer? Kitchen appliance. Okay, so pop up the details page here. I could actually give you negative feedback. I could send you private notes. I could even send you a message. Since you're brand new, and I appreciate your helping out with the demo, I most definitely will not do that, of course. So I'm just going to go ahead and approve all of these requests. So at the point only when I approve the requests do funds transfer from my Amazon account over to the worker's account. There's also a very important attribute of each hit that's called the auto approval delay. If I put a whole bunch of work in the system, promise people I'll pay them $1, get a bunch of good answers back, and then I vanish off to Mexico, after that auto approval delay, the workers will automatically be paid. If I do nothing, if I just go away, if I forget to manage the answers, they'll automatically be paid after that time delay. Oh, there's even a new thing. I actually asked them just to put this in just a couple days ago. I said, can you give me a little graph to show how quickly the answers come in? So he put this nifty graph in there called hit response time graph. So we can see that within the first less than 2 minutes, we already had 7 answers. So this to me is really game-changing kind of technology. When you've suddenly got this ability to get high-quality, high-volume answers at a very reasonable price, I think this really is going to change the kind of applications that people build. I'm really looking forward to the cool ideas that you guys have, and please feel free once you build something neat to let me know about it. So I was working a little bit on a more complicated one. I didn't actually finish this, and I won't take the time to do it right now. I wanted to actually run a question and only ask it of software developers. So I was thinking, how can I make sure that only software developers would answer this question? So in order to do that kind of restricted audience, you use a qualification. Here's a screenshot of the qualification I built. So before any developers could answer my actual question, they'd need to affirmatively answer all these questions in my qualification. So I asked them, which of the following is not a well-known programming language? Ruby, Perl, Diamond, or C#? Which of the following is not a commonly used commenting style? And which of the following is not a common programming tool? Or which of these is an acronym commonly used by software developers? And the winning one would be lines of code, and if the answer mapper for the not common programming tool, and then @add, of course, would not be a very common commenting style, and then Diamond isn't a well-known programming language. So my idea here, and I didn't get a chance to finish this up, was I would ask developers these 4 qualifying questions, and then once these questions were finished, I wanted to know what are your 5 favorite blogs that you use for getting technical information. So only developers that could successfully answer those questions would be allowed to work on the pieces of work that I put in there. So we might actually go in here. Let me see if I got any results for this. Developer questions, favorite blogs. And you know what? I didn't get any answers, and I think that's because this was the first time I'd ever tried to build something with qualifications, and it might be that nobody can successfully answer my qualifications. So these are the different kinds of work that are in here right now. We've got people that are, the task is to review a test submission, rank top 3 different things, provide ideas for some new features for some sites. Okay, so here's my developer questions, and it tells me I'm required to complete a test in order to obtain the qualification. If I continue, here's my qualification. I'll go ahead and answer this. And since I made the test, I'd better be able to give all the right answers. And that. And there we go. So I submit this test, and when I created this test, I was able to tell the Mechanical Turk the grading criteria. So I actually said for each of those answers, these are the number of points to assign for a correct answer. And I then said this is a passing score. So I said that I need to actually have 4 out of 4 in order to proceed. So the message here says I've been granted the qualification with a score of 1. And this then opens up the window of different kinds of things I'm allowed to do. So at this point, I could find my... Interesting. Okay, so this is why nobody's giving me any answers. For some reason, I don't have it properly set up, and I'm not getting those answers. But the reason I did that was to show you if you want to make hits in the system, and you want to limit those to audiences with a particular characteristic, you can use the qualification system to do that.
Well, how would somebody else test it? I mean, you made a mistake, right? So how would somebody else test that they said that one?
Okay, so the question is, how would someone else test this? So I literally set this up in like the last 5 minutes I was in the speaker ready room, and I didn't really intend to demo it. Somebody at the office had said, it sure would be cool to ask developers what their favorite blogs were. And we only wanted to qualify them as developers. And we were sitting around the dinner table last night saying, how could we just make sure only developers answered these questions? And I was sitting there thinking, I know, I'll just ask them some questions only developers would know. So in real life, you would actually use the hit builder tool to finish testing those. And I think what I might have done is I probably set too high of a score on the actual hits, because each different hit has the ability to say, this is the score that I need to see succeeding. So here it said I need a score of 1, and I think I put the hit and I said there was a score of 4 necessary, only because I'd never used the qualification system before. Okay, let's go back to Slide Machine. There we go. So that was hitbuilder.com. Really, really cool application. Totally ASP.NET based. Okay, there was our demo. Yeah, certainly. Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, do we have anything to basically control if people put illegal or unethical things in the system that would be used to defeat other situations where if some other site or application is trying to make sure there's a human out there? Certainly one of the things that we thought of early on, and our license agreement does govern usage like that, so we do have the ability, if we see any kind of a hit that we think is essentially a wrong kind of hit, that is being, it's not being used in I guess we have to think of it as a positive way. Now, that's not what the lawyer said, but there's definitely a clause in the license that says if we see hits that we are not happy with, we have the right to take them out of the system. So far, we've seen nothing but good things. We really haven't seen any malicious kinds of things at all in there, but the potential is certainly there. The fact that the hits are linked to an Amazon account certainly helps, because we know where these people are, and we can track them down and not give them the new Harry Potter or something, I suppose, if they do something untoward. And so there is reputation in the system both ways. I'm sure that this will come up at some point, and we'll then figure out the most appropriate way to deal with it. But great question. Okay, so let's talk about APIs. Another question in the front.
Do you have any kind of standard qualification for people so don't have to qualify for once again? Someone knows French language, you just test it once.
Okay, so the question was, do we have standard qualifications in the system so that if a worker or potential worker already knows French, can we just take that as an assertion rather than having to build it from scratch? Very, very interesting, because it used to be in my talks that I talked about the fact that developers could build upon the qualifications set by others. And it turns out that each developer is going to have different standards for what they constitute as acceptable quality levels for these things. So after I had given a talk and I mentioned that exact technique, somebody came up afterward and said, we tried that and it actually doesn't work so well. So I don't talk about that anymore. Instead, what we're expecting to do for the future is to have some way to link qualifications in the system to real-world qualifications. So I would envision at some point, and I don't have a time frame for this, you might be able to put in a qualification that says, must have a master's degree in English, or must be a certified engineer, or must be a Harvard graduate, or any kind of thing you could think of. Now, we also need to figure out how to certify those kinds of things. And you can imagine that those kinds of certifications themselves might be particular kind of hits, where we could say the registrar's office at Harvard could actually work on these hits that say, is this person qualified, or is this person a Harvard graduate or not? We're still in the very early days of this. This is still a beta application that we introduced in late November. So as the system matures, you'll definitely see more of these kinds of things addressed. Another thing that we're considering is that the qualifications might be able to access particular properties of Amazon accounts. So you could say, I only want people with a mailing address in Las Vegas to be able to answer these questions. Or maybe I only want people that have bought a lot of books on Amazon to be able to answer these kinds of questions. So we're actually looking for input from developers for very creative ways to build different kinds of qualifications. That answer for you? Great. So let's talk about APIs for a bit. So on the requester side, you either use our APIs or you can use a tool like Hit Builder. At this point, serious requesters are probably going to have development skills, unless what you want to do is going to fit within a builder tool. We do expect that we're going to tweak the API still a little bit during beta. At this point, we've probably done most of the big tweaks, and we're adding some new things. We're really not changing anything that's there. The workers right now, they always visit mturk.com to do their work. In the future, we do expect to have what we will call the worker API. We're still trying to figure out what that should consist of. You can envision for different kinds of hits that using a web browser might not be the best possible way to do those hits. There might be image processing. We had some hits in there for a while that were actually really bizarre. The question was, draw a sheep. And you can imagine a special purpose tool that might sit there on the desktop and would retrieve the next hit and then let the user draw and then automatically deal with submitting the image and closing out the hit. Right now, we don't have the APIs to do that. There's a lot of interesting issues with authentication, so we know exactly who the worker is. At this point, the workers do have to visit the MTurk site in order to do the work. If you're a potential developer of these kinds of special worker tools, we'd love to talk to you more about what you would like to see in that API. Let's talk a few of the basics of the APIs. So we have all the different Amazon Web Services. We allow use of two different protocols. The first one's called REST, is a very simple XML over HTTP. Some of the Microsoft folks actually call REST POX, or plain old XML. There's probably a slight difference between POX and REST in some esoteric little corner, but for the most part, REST or POX, I think we're talking about the same thing. We also support SOAP, which is a widely known but a little bit difficult to use standard for making web service requests. When you make the request, we always return a flag called isValid that represents the fact that we have validated your request. Important to check that. You need to URL encode all the data that you pass back and forth to us. So when you actually ask us the question, it's a big block of XML that you embed within another request. You need to make sure that you URL encode that so it passes in properly. And then you need to reference the proper namespace in the XML data. So these are all things that we've seen developers have just a little bit of trouble with as they make the requests to our service. Another little sticking point is what's called signing. So each different request that you make to Amazon, you need to use a secret key that we provide to you in order to sign the request, so we know that who is making the request. You take your secret key, you take the service and the operation and a timestamp, you run that through a hashing function called an HMAC. You then need to base64 encode that. You can use that value directly in your SOAP requests. If you're passing that in as a REST request, you need to then take one more step and URL encode it. I put this slide in here because developers have had just a little bit of friction here in getting started with the APIs due to the necessity of signing requests. Let's take a look at what it takes to actually design a system around the Mechanical Turk. First, you need to design some great hits. This is a bit harder than it seems, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Figure out the qualifications for your workers. Determine your approval strategy. This is actually one of the most important things. You need to figure out on your side, after you've made these requests to the workers, how will you decide if these are good responses or not. What we've seen during the beta test is that different developers have come up with different strategies. The part of the system that they experiment with the most is deciding how they will approve work. In some cases, they use this design pattern I call hits that beget hits, where there's a big piece of work in as the initial hit, and then the answer they get from that first one actually feeds back into the system as basically a please validate this answer hit with a slightly easier piece of work to be done. You build your application, put your funds into your Amazon account, load up the qualifications and load the hits. Your application then actually goes ahead and approves the completed assignments as the work happens. And as you can see, the completed work comes in very, very fast if there's always seems to be workers out there. We have workers registered in, at this point, 125 different countries. And then finally, you approve them and you retrieve the results and your program can proceed. Let's talk a bit about designing a good hit. When you're designing this hit, you use question elements. You can put titles, blocks of text. You can have radio groups, lists, binary data. You get your answers either as free text that the user can simply type in, selections from drop-downs, from radio groups, from checkboxes. You can build out all that XML from scratch, or there's a nifty tool that one of our developers built that's called the Question Builder. You can design it basically by filling out the form, and then the Question Builder emits the XML that you need to pass to the mechanical Turk. Some of the things we've learned about designing hits: you need to be very, very clear, specify exactly what you need, be very verbose, tell the workers what your expectations and your needs are, leave no ambiguities whatsoever. When people are doing work for a penny or two a piece, they'll read the directions once, but they're going to do it really, really fast. So be as unambiguous as possible. If you envision putting in 1 million hits, test drive a couple hundred first, check out your approval strategies, make sure that your hits are as unambiguous as possible. Make sure you have a none of the above choice in your hits. Make sure if punctuation, capitalization, spelling, if those things matter to you in your results, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, just make sure that you tell the workers that in your hit description. And then finally, experiment with your approval strategies. Worker qualifications are basically tests that you administer to workers. And once these qualifications are passed, then the workers can do your hits. So the qualification itself really looks very, very much like a hit. You can do objective qualifications where there's a multiple choice test you place in front of the worker, or a subjective qualification where the worker is entering free text. The multiple choice or objective qualifications are automatically graded by the system, and then based on passing or failing, the worker is either granted or not granted the qualification. Subjective tests are returned to you as the requester. You then look at them, you look at their work style and say, they're either doing what I need them to do or not do what's needed. If you're doing a beta test, if you need to restrict the workers to just a select group, what people have done is they use what I would consider a secret code qualification. You find a cool hit, you hit the link, and it says, please enter the magic number, and you're qualified to do this hit. So you then separately go out, you recruit a population of beta testers, you email them and say, the magic number is 52. And they put that magic number in the system, and they're able to proceed with the beta testing. So you can use existing qualifications if you're very, very careful. This is what I've talked about in the past. I've recommended in the past that people do build on existing qualifications. What I've learned recently is that it's not as great an idea as I thought it would be. This is the flow that an application takes. Your application loads up the qualifications, loads up the hits. As soon as you do that, the workers are going to immediately take off and start doing work. So your application needs to have a polling loop. You make an API call and say, are there any assignments completed? If they are, you retrieve them, approve them. Any particular local processing, if you want to take those results, stash them in your local database. On a hit-by-hit basis, you can do that. You see if there's more work to be done by seeing have all the hits you placed in the system, have they all been properly done. If there's more to be done, then you need to just go ahead and continue the loop. Otherwise, you do a little bit more. Once you're finished, if you need to wrap up that entire survey, you do your final bits of local processing, compute your averages, percentages, sums, whatever, and you're all finished. Couple API calls for getting qualifications, things like create qualification type, get qualification requests, and grant qualification. These are the APIs you would make when you're managing the qualifications. We've talked a little bit about answers and grading already. One thing that we don't have right now that we'll probably add during the beta, if you find workers with a particular skill, the ability to just simply attach a qualification to say these are deluxe workers or these people seem to have extra skills above and beyond what you're expected. You see them doing 100% work and you want to put a gold star and say qualify them for my executive group of workers. You can do that. You can't do that now. We hope to have an API to do that in the future. Loading hits, use things like create hit, where you pass in the actual XML that describes your hit. You can disable hits, you can extend them if nobody's worked on them and you need to put more time in the system. Very key to all of this is the concept of multiple assignments per hit. Any given hit or piece of work, you put it in there, and like the quick survey that I did, I asked for 10 different people to answer that. So each different instance of a person doing a particular piece of work is called an assignment. So the idea of multiple assignments for the same hit is really important. If I want to do that same question again and ask 1,000 people or 10,000 people, I would simply specify more assignments for the same hit. The auto approval time, we talked about a little bit already. Once the hit is in there, if the user does the work and then you don't approve their work, after that auto approval time has passed, they will then get paid automatically. You attach your qualifications, and you also have the ability to attach application data. So if you have a database key and you need to put the hit in the system and then follow it all the way through the system, and then it comes back to you, and your application needs to say, what piece of my application data is this hit associated with, you can use what's called requester annotation to tie that together. Then finally, you actually need to pull and approve the work. API calls such as get reviewable hits, get all the assignments for a hit to see all the work that's been done. Once you get the assignments and you get that list, okay, user 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are the answers they've done. You can either approve the assignments and pay them, or reject assignment and not pay them. You can dispose of hits after all the work has been done, extend them, and you have the ability to communicate with workers and send them emails as well. Getting results, get assignments for hit will actually give you all the answers that the users have put into the system. And you need to, once you've gotten all these answers, you need to either dispose of them or extend them, or the same answers are going to keep on coming back. So it gives you a list of pending things. You need to finish those up in order to proceed. On the local processing, this is, of course, going to be totally specific to your app. You'll probably end up doing some incremental processing for each different assignment that completes, and then some batch processing after the entire group of hits is done. You'll want to then summarize that entire batch. Probably have to wire up your application logic back to Mechanical Turk. If for some reason work gets into the system, and then on your side, if that work gets canceled, you'll want to go ahead and just dispose of those hits right away so that people don't do work for nothing. You end up paying them for doing work that you don't need. You have the ability to adjust the pricing and the timing. In the future, I envision that we'll have some even more automatic ways to do this. So you could envision putting in hits at a certain price. If the workers aren't working for them at that price, you can envision ramping up the price over time as you get closer and closer to a deadline. Right now, you do that manually, but in the future, I would expect to see some way to do that automatically. And then potentially you could control the set of qualifications over time. If you're not happy with the level of work that you get the first time, add in additional qualifications, put some restrictions on that piece of work. This is what you need to do to actually get started. Go ahead within your organization, look around and find potential hits. If you're an entrepreneur, look for an unmet need or some kind of underserved market. Design your whole workflow process. Start writing the code, loading the hits, process the results, and your work gets done. It's almost like magic when you start seeing these things in action. And we anticipate seeing some pretty neat things over the next year or two as it starts to get more and more popular. That's about it for presentation, and be happy to answer lots and lots of questions. It's right now about 5:30. I think we have about 10 more minutes to go. In the front. Okay, so the question is, what does IRS think of this? So what happens is that the workers are not actually working for Amazon. They are working for the requester. And this is specified in the worker agreement that they need to click through and agree to. If you're paying them enough money that they would need to actually pay taxes on that, it would be the requester's responsibility to give them a tax statement. Yes, the question, do you as the requester get enough information from Amazon to do that? Right now you have the ability to send requesters an email, and I think that's good. The amount of detail you get about requesters is definitely going to grow in the future, or about workers will grow in the future. Yeah, I'd agree. Question, where was that question from? Yeah, why don't we line up with the microphone? That way we can have a nice queue of questions here. Okay, question there.
Have you seen any commercial usages from large companies such as Match.com? They always have to validate their profiles to make sure that the person in the profile is, the primary person in the photo, or if they're secondary, then they can't use that as their primary photo. They have to validate any sort of text that's updated so it doesn't have personal contact information such as phone numbers or email addresses, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we haven't seen that exact example, but what we have seen is we've seen some pretty neat commercial real estate applications. We've seen applications where the assignment was go out to this particular street address and take a picture for appraisal purposes of a building. We've seen others where the work was to look at a scanned picture of a tax document, find the tax number in this document, and then go to another site, look up some tax valuation information, and return that as the value of the hit.
That's cool. And a second question, or actually a comment rather, because you mentioned that there were some ideas about standardizing pre-qualifications, that sort of thing. Have you considered standardizing that so that you, if it were like a language question, whether they had a certain proficiency in a language, you could create a standardized test that just about anybody could take. If I wanted to say, take a job or a hit that required me to know French, then I could take a standardized test and say I reach a beginner's level or an intermediate level or an expert level. You could expose that test to people who would be interested in those qualifications so that they understand specifically what somebody had to do in order to reach a particular level.
Okay, so thinking with my Amazon scalability hat on, I would think that we would probably work with outside agencies to help us do that, because it's probable, or it's guaranteed that somebody else besides us knows a lot better what would constitute each of those levels. So I would expect that we will find these groups and work with them to help have them create the tests, and then they could put their brand and their name on these tests. And maybe things like a law school admission test. You could imagine that you need to pass that level of test in order to do particular kinds of work, or even like a bar exam. And that's same kind of external certification.
Right, and then you would identify those needs for those standardized tests based on what type of qualifications people are trying to build themselves.
Exactly, yeah. Definitely something we could aim for in the future.
Definitely one of the coolest things that I've seen in the last couple of days, by the way. When does Amazon expect to plug us in and take body heat and turn it into energy? I guess is the next step. You mentioned the test scores ahead when you're basically doing the pre-qualification. Assuming that you put too rigid a score in there and people aren't able to qualify through, so let's say you ended up with a 100% failure rate, are there any tools to tell you really where people were coming in their scores? So let's say you set scores 1 through 5, you said you minimally need to get a 4 and everyone was getting a 3. Can you realize that, yeah, this really is my population, but I actually want to just drop this down a little bit?
Yeah, there is an API to let you get the results of the qualifications, and you would then be able to look at those and probably see, like I did, that I probably constructed the qualification improperly.
Okay. And the other question is is it possible to get into the ratio between amount of work in the pre-qualification process compared to amount of work perceived in the actual task? So to your, you had 6 development questions that you asked, and then you asked one question about your blogging site. I might find myself spending 20 minutes to go, perform a 30-second task.
Right, that's a great question. And what I would probably do if I put that hit in for real, I'd put a fairly restrictive set of questions for qualification. I'd then put a high enough reward. If I was putting that in for real, I'd probably put like a 50-cent reward on there. I'd expect someone to spend at least a minute or so giving me a high quality answer.
Right, but I mean, like when you get called up and you get asked to do a marketing.
And you never know if it's going to take an hour or not.
People will tell you, do you have a few moments? This process will take approximately 13 to 15 minutes. Do you have that much time?
We don't have that now. That's actually a great idea. And we do envision having workers have the ability to rate requesters. So if requesters are doing essentially a poor job of accepting work, if we've seen requesters in the past that actually rejected like 95% of all the work. And it was usually because they didn't make their hits in a good form. So requesters or workers will ultimately be able to say, don't deal with those guys. They don't seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We do transportation logistics software where there's huge graph theory problems that are long-running jobs that we get into very massively parallel graphing solutions, and a lot of the meta-heuristics for that can be cut down substantially by just a pair of eyeballs. And so to be able to integrate those processes, have stop points, kick them out for human interaction, then go back and compute in the local search neighborhoods that
Certainly.
you get to after doing that.
Yeah, so you could envision having a very restrictive qualification. You might even be able to say, we only want people within our own organization to be able to do those kinds of work, and use the mechanical Turk as your work queuing system. Right?
Got a couple of questions. First, is there an API to find out somebody's reputation rating?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And does that cover these qualifications, or is that something that would be added to that API in the future?
I believe the qualifications are in there. I'd really need to look at the return results to tell you, but I'm pretty sure that's in there as well.
Okay. My second question is, what APIs do you think will get added to Amazon Web Services in the future?
Oh, I'm really bad at predicting the future. You can see from what we've done in the past that we're really trying hard to build innovative services that we think a wide range of developers would find interesting. I'm very, very bad at talking about the future, mostly because I'm supposed to talk about the present. But stay tuned. We've got things like our web services blog. Got the address on here somewhere. Yeah, if you go to aws.typepad.com, we announce new services there. Also, we show up cool applications that developers have built. And there's a lot of neat stuff happening. Over there?
Cool. First of all, more than the technology, the idea itself is pretty cool. I really like that.
Well, thank you.
There are two aspects. One is a requester, the worker, and I call the Amazon as a mediator probably. My question is more legal, especially international commerce, intellectual property rights, and those kind of things. Suppose there's a question asked in terms of an algorithm and the answer is given. As a mediator, do you own it? Or as a requester and the worker have a contract, does the requester own the IP? What is the idea that if the worker sells the same thing to someone else? What is that legal impact?
That's a really deep question. So I think you'd want to consult our license agreement. I know that we worked really hard with our legal department to get answers like that figured out, and I'm not the best one to consult on the nuances of that, but we did spell it out very, very clearly in the license, and I'd refer you to that for the
reason why
final
I'm
answer.
asking is most of the businesses would be very much willing to cover themselves, and they don't want inadvertently their logic or their algorithm is being owned by somebody else.
Correct.
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay. Over there?
Probably I'm adding on to the last question. The legal and the tax issues seems to be very gray over here. Especially, I just registered as a worker and I answered one of your questions, and I don't know where am I making my money. Is my money, I'm working in the US, so am I supposed to pay my tax in the US for that, or sitting in India, it's taxable in India? That throws up a lot of questions, and you answered it. I think Amazon Legal would have covered your side by making sure you don't have any problems, but from a requester perspective, I think that's going to stop a lot of people till clarity comes on that. Any thoughts on?
So I suspect that some of this would be considered state-of-the-art by tax folks, and I'm totally unqualified to talk about the implications, but there's a large number of parties involved here. There's multiple countries, and there's questions of where were the physical servers located versus where was the worker and the requester. I don't have a simple, clean answer for you on that one.
Any thoughts going on, any blogs where people are talking about this?
Not that I've seen firsthand. I'd be happy to hook you up with the Amazon tax folks if that would help you out to make some good decisions there. I know that they've put a huge amount of work into figuring these things out. Okay, we've got about 2 more minutes, so 2 more questions.
Okay, first I want to say with the drawing the sheep, my wife did that. I watched her do that. It was difficult. It didn't look like a sheep. But what I did want to talk about was as the workforce goes and they educate themselves, they become rated at first. Their rating, is there a way for that to grow and to advance as they get degrees, pass a bar exam, get a certification such as an MCP exam?
Yeah, I would anticipate that workers will have the ability to proactively register qualifications in the system. One of the things that we will like to be able to do once the system matures a bit is we should be able to really enumerate and say, these are the qualities and characteristics of the worker population. So we've got this many people with these kinds of degrees, and we've got 1,000 people that speak French, and we've got several hundred people that do these other obscure kinds of things. I would expect that as things grow, we'll have the ability to do those kinds of things for you. And the last question.
Do you think that your experience with this so far has stabilized to the point where you would know what certain kinds of work are worth? And secondly, do you plan on publishing that kind of data so that the people who want to get work done have a clue as to what they should set their rates at?
Okay, that is a great question. Seems like it deserves an essay answer. So we don't have any real guidelines for exactly what things are worth. And one of the interesting challenges right now is if you go to that page that lists all the hits, if you go there every minute or two and just refresh your browser, you'll see this just ever-changing just spectrum of different kinds of things in there at all different kinds of prices. I know that we've talked to requesters of various sorts, and they've definitely told us that they trade off the work versus the price versus the qualifications, and they definitely see better results when you're willing to pay more for it. You got to realize some of these workers, when they're doing it for a penny, they glance at it for a second and they just click really fast. I did this interesting experiment where I put we have a dog within our group. Okay, at Amazon you're allowed to bring your pet to work. Okay, so I did this experiment. I put a picture a picture of our dog and a picture of a competitor's dog, and I said, which one do you like the best? And our dog actually won like 99-1. And I thought, wow, cool, we have the best internet company dog. But I looked, and ours was actually the first one in the selection. And I then did another experiment and put the other one first, and it won. So unless you're like really, really careful, sometimes people are going to just they're going to look and say, okay, cool, that's the cuter dog, I'll just pick that one rather than, whereas if I said, okay, this one really counts, and I'm going to rate you on this, and I'm going to measure your ability to choose these things. What was that one? Oh, okay. Okay, so we don't have automatic randomization, but what I would do if I do this again is I would simply put the hit in twice, and I would just vary that order myself. And if I was using an API, I would just put that randomization into the API. But great way to do it, to give you a little bit more, a better indication of the validity of the results. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate all the attention, all the great questions.